I know what you're thinking, and yes, I should have done this a long time ago, but me and Common Sense have not been on speaking terms for quite a while now. Resident Evil Infinite Darkness was part of that initial push for RE to return to the silver screen shortly after the rapid success of RE2 Remake. The goal, or at least the press around these new RE stories, seemed to point towards a kind of collective apology. Capcom and these producers knew how much hell the previous RE movies had caught from fans of the games, and a betting man would put their money on someone trying to remedy that problem. But, well, I guess that's why we're here. I watched Infinite Darkness back when it first released, and although I had a good enough time with it, I wouldn't exactly say it made me see the concept of a Resident Evil miniseries in a new light. I will say, however, after watching Welcome to Raccoon City and the latest Netflix show, it does seem a lot better in retrospect, but it has been a while since that first viewing, so what do you guys say we dust off this 4-episode run and see if it holds up? The cool thing being, I think I've forgotten a lot of the main story hooks, so I'm actually kind of interested to see if my overall opinion ends up changing after a second viewing. Now, for those of you who haven't checked out Infinite Darkness, spoiler warnings are in order. When I cover movies and TV shows, I like to cover the plot points as they take place, and that means we will be revealing a lot of stuff you may not want ruined. So let's go ahead and say everything past this point is going to spoil something for you, and if you haven't watched it yet, go ahead and do that first before checking out my video. Oh, and as always, the sorry state of YouTube's Content ID system means two things. One, there's a good chance this video was caught in an endless loop of getting struck with Content ID hits, me making changes, and trying to re-upload. Not to mention the 30 days I often have to wait for any Content ID issues to get ironed out. So if this video ends up being late, at least I've got an okay excuse this time. And second, I apologize for whatever butchery I have to enact on the visuals here in hopes of lessening its chances of getting caught in the aforementioned loop. Really, what I'm trying to get at is, if this video sucks, it's only partially my fault. Well, I think that's enough foreshadowing. Ladies, gentlemen, I'm Jared from Avalanche Reviews. Welcome to the Resident Evil Retrospective. I'll admit, at first Infinite Darkness really got my hopes up. I've always preferred the CG animated RE movies over the live action ones, a sentiment I think most people might at least sympathize with, but we also got news that it would be directed by Ichiro Hasumi, the guy behind the absolute timeless Opie Volleyball. A film that, if you were uncultured enough to have not seen it yet, is the story of a teacher motivating her underage students by promising to show them her boobs if they win a volleyball game. Surely, if we stood any chance in hell of getting an authentic and respectful video game to film adaptation, this was it.
Nice, Opie.
For real though, this guy's output is far from what I call prolific. He did, however, head a film based on a favorite TV series of mine, Mozu, and it was pretty solid, so I did have, well, not high hopes, maybe, let's say, slightly less low ones. Alright, so Infinite Darkness opens on a pretty generic scene. It's the old helicopter mission into a nondescript Middle Eastern conflict zone thing. Oh, and extra stereotype points for having this guy ignore direct orders to help some fellow soldiers who were shot down. Our military crew hits the dirt, and while they were able to get the pilot out, the rest fared a little worse. The enemy forces string up their catch and douse them with gas, getting ready to make a show out of the whole thing, but just before they can, one of the soldiers seems to come back to life. Then we cut to Claire Redfield doing literally the only thing any writer seems to think she's capable of post-RE2, humanitarian aid. Now listen, I'm not saying helping those in need isn't noble, but come on, this is Claire Redfield. Can we have a single story where she's as much of a badass as she is in the games? And on a smaller note, or maybe a bigger one depending on how you look at it, how should I put this? Okay, I'm not trying to be mean, but there's a chance someone in the art department overcranked the nose length slider here. I'm not trying to say there's anything wrong with having a big schnoz. I don't exactly have a small one myself, but we already have a general outline for how Claire's supposed to look. And in this movie, they sort of threw that away and assumed she was like a Dick Tracy character, maybe. I don't know, maybe it's just me. Let me know in the comments if I'm out of line here. Anyways, as Claire tries to console a little boy who was caught in the Civil War, she sees this drawing that seemed to depict a Raccoon City-esque zombie outbreak. After that, we're taken to a meeting that includes the president, Leon Kennedy, the soldier from the intro, and a few other agents chosen for a bit of a special assignment. Someone's apparently broken into a Pentagon server and dashed off with some serious military secrets. This team is charged with finding out who did this, and on a bit of a side note, tell me this does not look like some jacked-ass version of JJ from Residence of Evil. I mean, it's almost uncanny. Well, just as the defense secretary starts blaming China for the intrusion, the lights go out in the Oval Office and everything goes on lockdown. Our team comes across the press secretary who seems to have come into contact with the business end of a zombie outbreak. One of our special agents is a little hesitant to shoot him and instead, oh Jesus, he launched him into orbit. Thank God this guy's doing government work and not kicking people in half in the UFC. After emptying his gun into the zombie, it looks like it's curtains for the guy when Leon rushes in with the old 360 no-scope. Our team regroups in the Oval Office and gears up to get rid of some deadheads. Oh, and I forgot to mention, this takes place in between Resident Evils 4 and 5, so the president is still actively thanking Leon for saving his daughter recently. I don't really think that ties into the story much, but it's a little weird going from dopey action hero Leon in 4 to slightly emo, altruistic Leon in what seems like a very short period. So the boys get together to clear out the zombie threat and end up getting things taken care of in a pretty timely manner. The next day, Claire shows up wanting to talk to some higher-ups about the possibility of zombies popping up in the Middle East, and we get the first Claire-Leon reunion I can think of outside of Resident Evil Degeneration. The defense secretary then informs the president that the content stolen from the Pentagon servers had to do with Chinese counterintelligence and suggests they should send the new team into China to check things out. When he gets a little pushback against the idea of sparking an international incident without any objective intel, dude literally yells at the president, which actually works. So the team jumps aboard a submarine and Jason, aka JJ, lets them know what they're up to, or at least he would if it wasn't almost all classified. After the brief briefing, Leon asks Shenmei over here on a date, proving it's not so much his traumatic past with Ada that makes him pine after her so much, but probably just a regular old Asian fetish. After he gets shot down, Leon walks around the sub and finds Jason in what seems to be a lot of pain and holding a syringe maybe. Then the show sends us back to the moment where the soldiers were being burned and shows us the rest of what happened. The zombified soldiers break loose and do exactly what you think they would do, and even the guy who was cut in half finds himself a victim. Moving ahead with the next episode, Claire tries to figure out why there might be zombies and actually, I don't think I've talked about this yet, but the fictional Middle Eastern state here in Infinite Darkness is called PanAmStan, a name that, as far as fictional, vaguely Arabic-sounding location names go, isn't exactly the worst I've heard, but it's definitely pretty goofy sounding in a sentence. According to popular belief, the conflict that Jason was wrapped up in PanAmStan was just a thinly veiled attempt at getting a strategic military force loyal to the US set up near China. Claire falls pretty deep into this rabbit hole and ends up with the stereotypical Pepe Sylvia pinboard type setup. In doing so, a lot of her leads keep pointing back to Jason and his military unit known for heroically fronting the fight over there. Apparently his team are all dead except for him and one other person, something that's not exactly uncommon for a military unit currently deployed in the Middle East, but it seems like a lot of them died after coming back home. Then we get taken back to the rescue mission from the start of the show to get a better idea of what went down there. And if you haven't noticed by now, that's a reoccurring theme that's going to continue throughout the entire show. Every single episode has us coming back to this one incident, and each time we get a little more context, so get used to this going down. Like we know before, the team ended up rescuing one of the soldiers from the helicopter, but now we know he sort of lost all of his extremities. Then it cuts to some time later, and they're pretty shaken up about something that happened in the meantime. Apparently, the military has bombed the entire town where the helicopter went down, knowing full well another team was in the area attempting a rescue. Our squad for sure witnessed the zombie outbreak that's being hinted at, and they seem to have taken one with them in a body bag. Flash forward and we're back to the sub where Jason and Leon are having a heart-to-heart concerning their shared experience surviving horrible situations. Jason says he can sympathize with the government nuking Raccoon City to save the country, and Leon lets some of that good old-fashioned I want to save everyone attitude out. As Jason lectures us on the origins of terror, the sub jostles around and everyone panics exactly as much as they should given they're inside a giant metal water coffin. When the two get to the bridge, or whatever this is called in a submarine, they find the crew dead, their wounds looking a lot like the kind a BOW leaves behind. So for some reason they decide to split up, and Jason and Shen-mei reveal themselves to be less than loyal to the mission. While Leon's snooping around, we get to see what caused all the damage, and T-virus rats weren't exactly something I thought I was creeped out by until I saw one. These things start popping out of corpses en masse. At the same time, it's announced that
the self-destruct sequence has been activated.
A whole swarm of these nasty little things corner our boy, but Leon fucking Kennedy ain't about to die to no rodent infestation. So he links back up with Jason and Shen-mei and they blow the place. After the sub explodes, the defense secretary says that a Chinese vessel was spotted in their last known location, and everyone obviously assumes it was them that did the deed. Our infiltration team gets to the safe house in mainland China, and Leon notices evidence that Shen-mei took out the guards he found near the escape hatch, so he confronts the two and lets them know he's on to them. Now that things are out in the open, Jason comes clean and admits that he and Shen-mei are colluding to prove the government was behind PanAmStan. Jason tries talking Leon into joining their efforts since both of them know what it's like to come up against a massive American government conspiracy, but Leon refuses and instead shows off some killer reaction speed. With Jason apparently dead and Shen-mei on the run, we hit the end of episode 2. Heading into the next one, we catch up with Claire as she's investigating a somewhat abandoned house that belonged to a member of the Mad Dogs, Jason's old unit. Now, I'm not exactly sure what kind of power a civilian working for an NGO has, but I'm fairly certain they're not allowed to investigate much of anything, let alone illegally enter someone else's house. Inside, she finds the guy doing his best Kurt Cobain impression, and the show cuts to Shen-mei as she's tailed by Leon heading into this big-ass estate. After Leon gets the drop on her, she reveals that her little brother is infected with the same virus that caused the PanAmStan outbreak, and her goal here is to get enough evidence to prove that it was the defense secretary that orchestrated all of this. Then we get another flashback to the helicopter crash, only this time we see it was indeed this guy who called for the place to be bombarded. Shen-mei, turns out, was one of the radio operators during the mission and is feeling pretty bad for her part in glassing an entire zip code when she gets a call from the Mad Dogs saying they made it outside the hot zone and had a survivor with them. That survivor turning out to be Shen-mei's own brother. She keeps her mouth shut on the matter and decides to go meet them personally. It seems like whoever was in charge of her brother's unit was also working with a pharmaceutical company looking to do a little human testing. Heading back to Claire, she finds another piece of the puzzle, and yes, it takes us right back to the helicopter crash. After the Mad Dogs escaped the crash site with Shen-mei's brother, they were held up in some building waiting for evac. Command doesn't seem to be answering any of their calls, and old No-Limbs over here doesn't seem to have very long. While they're formulating a plan, a full-scale zombie outbreak gets dropped on their heads, and to be totally honest, they were a little slow on the draw for highly trained soldiers, so essentially everyone ends up getting bit in some way. Shen-mei's brother lets them know that they're infected, and if they don't inject the inhibitor he has on him, they'll start turning into zombies too. So Jason and the crew decide to keep their mouths shut about all this and return to base, being given a hero's welcome. Wilson, the defense secretary, uses the fact that each of them needs the inhibitor to stay alive as a bargaining chip, making sure they would do his bidding. In the meantime, he basically used the unit as a sort of personal assassination team, cleaning up more of his messes, which is what ended up getting him his current job. Oh, and good news, apparently he's still working with that pharmaceutical company. Shen-mei's grandfather is a bit of a bigwig over in China, so he used his connections to smuggle his grandson into the country, and while he was able to halt his transformation, he can't cure the condition. They were, however, able to find a chip inside of him that was meant to track his vitals and send information back to Wilson, which they think will expose him for what he's done. Which is really odd because they make it seem like they've had this thing for a while now, but for some reason haven't gone public with it yet. And they may not get to because as Shen-mei finishes her story, the place starts coming down around her. Back at the Oval Office, Wilson presents the president with a speech condemning what he's calling a Chinese attack on a US ship and the hacking of the Pentagon, a move that has people understandably nervous. Standing on top of the rubble that used to be her grandfather's house and grandfather, Shenmei only now thinks to go public with the info on the chip, and Leon doesn't want her to because he says Wilson will have people hunting her for the rest of her life, which is true, but what's the alternative here? What, she lives but countless more people become zombies in human testing? Oh, and for some reason Leon just instinctively knows Jason was responsible for the attack on the house, but I'm not really sure how he intuited that. The last time he saw Jason, the guy had a bullet hole in his chest. Plus, why would your first assumption when looking at all this be, well, some guy definitely did this all by himself? If I'm being honest, my first assumption would probably be that Wilson sent a bomber over to keep things quiet. That makes a lot more sense to me. Well, anyways, we rejoin Claire as she studies her Alex Jones Lizard People conspiracy board, but she's interrupted by a power outage. Earlier in the day, she confronted Wilson about the Mad Dog, so she's pretty quick to assume this isn't a coincidence, which is good because it's not. Some government G-man sneaks in, but Claire gets the jump on him and takes him to the ground with a pretty cool front kick. As she mounts him to finish the job, a second agent tases her, and we officially head into the last episode of the series, which opens with the preparations for the presidential speech introduced in the last episode, and it looks like the other member of that secret task force is on guard duty, which raises a very interesting question. Why didn't this guy head to China with the rest of them? He was definitely part of the team in episode 1. I'm sure there's some kind of reason I just missed, but anyways, he gets a call from Leon cluing him in on what's been going down, and he's given instructions to let the president know. From there, we're taken to an underground bunker, the likes of which we must have seen 10 trillion times throughout the course of the RE series, where Wilson has Claire tied up to a chair and is offering her a deal. He's saying that he's going to build the PanAmStan schools and hospitals she's been trying to secure funding for if she drops her investigation into the Mad Dog unit. For some reason, even though she's clearly not keen on this deal, he still proceeds to do a supervillain thing and monologue about his goals. From what I understand, the hope is to have his pharmaceutical friends offer this super soldier drug to the PanAmStan government, and when they adopt it, a whole lot of people will be infected with a virus that requires the constant use of an inhibitor to keep them from hulking out. Just as Wilson threatens to infect Claire, Jason shows up, and he's not exactly happy. It seems like he's through living in fear of not getting the inhibitor, so he's gonna go out in a blaze of glory, and he's planning on taking Wilson with him. Just then, Leon and Shenmei show up right as the place prepares to sterilize itself by flooding the shaft with acid. Then mutated Jason proceeds to have a full-on, coherent-ass conversation with Leon and Shenmei about how his new plan is to go topside and crash the speech so that everyone can see what the government did to him. A plan that honestly isn't terrible, but Shenmei tries to stop him because she's got the chip. And I'm like, why not both approaches? You know, have a little public evidence to back up the data on the chip, which very well could be falsified. Well, Jason's definitely not having that. He's apparently about as irrational as the people he's talking to, so he attacks Leon and Shenmei confronts him, which leads to the second time Leon has watched a Chinese woman die in an underground research facility. Completely unfazed by what has become a yearly event for him, Leon saves Claire and gets himself into a position we all know he's not going to capitalize on. Back at the event topside, Patrick lets the president know that Wilson's behind everything, and armed with this knowledge, he chooses to ditch the anti-China speech and instead goes for one that's pro-PanAmStan. It's so hard to say. I hate this name. Like, if you're in the middle of saying a sentence, it's really hard to just go PanAmStan. See, I did it. It's PanAmStan. I hate this name so fucking much. Back in the shaft, Jason is desperately trying to get to the surface, with Leon and Claire halting his progress, and he gets damn close, but Leon's able to blow off one of his arms, and honestly, I've been going back and forth with this, but the guy's starting to make a lot of sense to me. It seems like he just wants people to see what the government turned him into, but Leon's fighting like hell to keep him from doing that, and I'm not exactly sure why. Even after Jason's explained that he only wants the people to see him, Leon nearly sacrifices himself to make sure that doesn't happen. Leon, buddy, you gotta start picking your battles. I know the whole thing is that Leon wants to protect everyone, but you can't protect people from, being scared of something they saw. Well, anyways, Jason takes a header right into the acid, and I guess Leon can sleep at night knowing he risked his life to make sure a room full of politicians and press didn't have to look at something scary for a short time. Then there's this honestly gripping scene where the melted remains of Jason's body is impaled on metal debris and surrounded by light shafts. It's kind of beautiful in a way. Leon assures Jason that what happened to him ends here, but Jason with his last breath tells Leon that because he has witnessed this, the terror will spread. And just before his body totally liquefies, he repeats his slogan about people knowing true fear. After everything's handled, Leon and the president share a manly nod, and we cut back to Wilson, who is struggling with his newfound infection, and we find out it was Tricell that he was working with the whole time. Then we get to see Claire and Leon meet up again, and she asks him about the chip. She says she wants to make a copy of the info on it and give it to all the newspapers, but Leon refuses for some reason. Claire is reasonably pissed about this and says, well, if that's how it's going to be, she'll pursue it in her own way. Leon walks away saying that he'll put a stop to this, but I can't possibly understand why he thinks that's going to require no one ever knowing about all this. I really don't understand what they're doing with Leon's character in these last few episodes. I mean, everything he does makes absolutely no sense, and they never explain his reasoning. He's sort of a bad guy. And this is the same Leon that in episode 2 had problems with the US government covering up a nuclear attack on Raccoon City. And I guess you could make an argument for character growth here, but it happened almost in an instant, and we've gotten literally no rationalization from him. We're just sort of left to assume he's doing what's right in his mind, but he doesn't explain why that is or how he's going to go about fixing any of these problems. Well, the last few seconds before the credits roll leaves us with this really dumb shot of Leon being all stoic for no reason, and that's the end of the series. And I just have to assume the creators wanted to set up for another season or something, because otherwise it just looks like Leon's a piece of shit. The guy has the evidence to take down the exact people who perpetrated all of this, but chooses not to for reasons that are never spelled out. And then the last shot of the show is just Leon walking back to the White House with this heroic music playing as if he doesn't look like a complete ass right now. But like I said, that's all she wrote. We never got any kind of a continuation, and to be honest, I'm not sure we ever will. Enough time's already passed since ID came out that I doubt anyone will want to continue a story most people will have probably forgotten, and I'm not sure it did well enough to justify doing it anyways. But I guess for the purposes of this review, the future isn't really important, so how did I feel about Infinite Darkness?
Sorry, champ. That's classified for now.
Well, as it turns out, that's a bit of a complicated question, actually. This is what I would call a pretty watchable quasi-political thriller. For a majority of its runtime, there are no zombies to fight or outbreaks to escape, but instead a web of lies slowly being unraveled with a few politicians and some shady government work at the center of it all. Now, I'll be honest, this was a pretty easy win for Infinite Darkness because I've always really enjoyed this genre. While most people like to focus on your more common types of fiction with elves and orcs shooting arrows and swinging axes, I've always sort of been more interested in fantasizing about the weird shit the government gets up to when no one's looking. You know the type, people who you've never heard of before, commanding more power than you could possibly imagine, sort of running things from the shadows. I love it when organizations with 3 or 4 letter acronyms for names start getting thrown around, and we get to ponder that the more visible elements of this stuff, like public military conflict, might be tied to shadowy dealings between dark figures. I don't know, it just works on me for some reason. And in that realm, I'd say Infinite Darkness is pretty okay. It's certainly more simplistic than I'd like. I mean, the entire time there's a pretty clear-cut distinction between good and evil when a lot of the appeal of this genre comes from things like moral ambiguity, terrible deeds done for good causes, stuff like that. ID certainly has the skeleton of a good political thriller, but I think the key players are pretty obviously showing their hands the whole time, so you never really get the chance to be surprised when the bad guy's revealed. The actual source of the conflict in the plot is cool too. I like that the relationship between Wilson and Tricell sort of mirrors the stuff Ares 1, 2, and 3 were hinting at with Umbrella, and having a war-torn soldier under the thumb of these big interests feels like a cool move. I guess what I'm trying to say is ID does a good enough job at what it's trying to be. It's not exactly what I call a paragon of this genre, but it takes elements that have always been in RE games and magnifies them in a way that'll be pleasing to people who already get into this stuff. So a fan of the games will probably get a kick out of seeing these familiar elements thrown into a thriller like this, but if you're not big into the games but want something new in the thriller genre, I doubt this is going to give it to you. Alright, this is sounding much more negative than I originally wanted. Infinite Darkness may not be the best political thriller, but it's a good enough watch. I enjoyed seeing the characters I love breaking up government conspiracies and getting to the bottom of mysteries that go all the way to the top. That being said, I did mention earlier that I'm of two minds with this whole thing, so when's the damning criticism gonna hit? Well, if you read in between the lines in the last 30 seconds or so, you'll probably see this coming. ID, while a serviceable enough thriller, lacks almost everything a Resident Evil fan would be looking for in a show based on their favorite game series.
What?
I know I bring this up in every one of these reviews, but trust me, it brings me no happiness to harp on this so much. Infinite Darkness in its 2-hour runtime includes about 6, maybe 7 minutes worth of zombie action, and that's not an exaggeration either. Trust me, I went through and checked. Now you might say they couldn't do much in that department because this show takes place in between 2 entries in the canon, and showing some kind of insane scale zombie outbreak in a major location might break continuity in the timeline. A timeline I'd argue Capcom never cared much about the integrity of in the past, but it's a fair point. So I guess the question is, what was gained by setting ID here anyways? You didn't make any revelations that would affect either game, so the setting in time feels more like a purposeful constraint than a benefit to the story. I do have to be fair though, I'm not sure there's much more that can be done here. The threat of a zombie outbreak has sort of lost its impact at this point in the RE universe. I remember renting RE1 and it coming with a demo for 2. Man, the idea of what was going down in the Spencer Mansion happening on a wide scale in some US city, God, it just felt like the highest stakes imaginable. Sadly, now that's sort of become the baseline, which is actually why I really like the remakes. Ever since that initial outbreak, the series has been sort of lacking in impact for me, so going back to a point when it was fresh works in my mind. Well, anyways, that was just a long-winded way of me saying that Infinite Darkness has a pretty okay story, it's just not a Resident Evil story. As a spin-off, I think it works. Like that one episode of Fringe where it was suddenly and without explanation a noir detective story, Infinite Darkness is a jarring genre swap including well-known characters and concepts from the RE games. I just can't help but feel like the series wasn't exactly hurting for fresh takes on things when this was released. I mean, if you get a room full of RE fans together and ask them what they'd want out of a Resident Evil show or movie, I doubt very much the answer would be yet another reinterpretation. I mean, think about it. We have never been blessed by an even halfway accurate depiction of the games, and I can't help but feel like Capcom is purposely missing the point here. It seems to me like their reasoning is that they haven't steered far enough away from the games yet, and maybe one day when they release a 12-part epic about Claire Redfield being denied a small business loan, they finally will have put out a good Resident Evil show. So there's my 2 opposing thoughts on the series in a general sense. Together they make for an opinion more negative than positive, but I don't want that to come across like I hate Infinite Darkness. It was interesting and I was engaged almost the whole time. I just feel like the upsides of it being a political thriller aren't enough to make up for the lack of real RE content. Okay, so with the more rational stuff out of the way, I did have a few more dumb complaints. And I'm gonna get incredibly petty here. Why the hell did they think it was okay to do this to Claire? Sure, you could argue they've been pretty liberal with Leon's appearance across the CGI Resident Evil series, but to date, they've yet to quadruple the size of his damn nose. Now, yes, I am being a little pedantic, but it does seem odd to go this route. Usually when you make adjustments to a major character in the franchise, you don't specifically try to make them look worse on purpose. And coming from a guy with a big nose, trust me, that's not a feature I feel needs representation in my escapist media. But if you are gonna do it, I guess why stop at the nose? Why not give her a wart on her cheek or maybe a lazy eye? I don't know, I mean, I don't get it, I really don't. But petty stuff aside, I really don't like the direction these new movies have been going in with Claire. This woman survived Raccoon City, why is her role always relegated to a social worker in these things? Leon always seems to get the spotlight and Claire's always left doing some lesser side shit in a support kind of role. I really don't like it. I mean, I'm not arguing for the polar opposite of this approach, like in Welcome to Raccoon City where she was an unstoppable plot god who knew everything and was capable of single-handedly taking on every zombie in RC. I just want a story that represents these two the way that they were in the games they were introduced in. Leon and Claire were both in over their heads, but they both had what it took to survive. Ever since RE4 though, the expectation has been that Leon will be doing cartwheels and back gainers over tyrants while Claire makes sure to file all of his paperwork for him. It's a travesty if you ask me. Other than that though, Jason's character started off pretty original and cool. I mean, a soldier with PTSD serving as a major role in an RE story sounds like a smart move to me, and yes, before you type it, I am aware of Billy Cohen, thank you very much. I think Jason's character could have been executed so much better though. I mean, his motivation is great, and I like that he's been forced into what is essentially a contract killer job for Wilson. From the flashbacks, you get the sense that he's a good guy and wouldn't be killing these people if he could help it, and that makes for a complex role. Sadly, towards the end though, he's turned into a two-dimensional movie bad guy. His obsession with making everyone feel true terror seems irrational and sort of dumb. Even worse than that, his end goal towards the last leg of episode 4 was kinda small scale. You'd think maybe he'd want to spread the virus so that everyone could feel his pain, or maybe go topside and kill the people who did this to him, but nah, the guy just wanted people to see what they had done to him, or at least that's the impression I got. I mean, the guy didn't exactly proclaim out loud that he wanted to hurt anyone. But worse than that is how hard Leon fought to make sure he wasn't seen. Like, I've got to be misinterpreting this, because otherwise this combined with the ending sort of makes Leon out to be some government spook willing to kill people and bury evidence that might hurt the current administration. And last on my list of lesser complaints is Shenmei. She seemed like a cool character that maybe could have been added to the RE cinematic universe as it were, but instead she gets this uneventful, pointless death. I don't know, maybe have her stepping in between Jason and Leon and getting killed accidentally or something, but this definitely doesn't do it for me. Jason killing her for no reason just doesn't make any sense. I mean, he's not exactly like Birkin, he's still got his wits about him, and the guy's capable of rational conversation, so why does he ice this 80-pound Chinese woman who was his friend up till about 3 minutes ago? She's not even armed in this scene, and to add insult to injury, she was being nice to Jason. It's like everything that happens in episode 4 was decided by someone who wasn't around for the creation of the previous 3 episodes, because no one's acting within their established character traits. Well, I have definitely rambled enough. I think it's time to get to the business of consolidating this all into some coherent thought. Resident Evil Infinite Darkness, unlike Welcome to Raccoon City or the RE Netflix show, is actually pretty okay. It might not be anything like the games it's based on, but as a show, it's a fun enough watch. I don't imagine RE fans will enjoy so little of it being dedicated to, well, RE, but honestly this might be the closest one of the CG entries in the series has gotten to being wholly entertaining on its own. Don't get me wrong, I like the last 3 CGI movies, but let's be honest, they were really dumb. Infinite Darkness manages to tell probably the most mature tale yet, and on top of that, the CG looks pretty damn good most of the time. So I guess this one gets a tentative thumbs up from me. You won't exactly be missing out on anything revolutionary if you skip it, but if you don't, you won't be cringing at your screen the entire time either. I would say it's entirely enjoyable, but only just so. Man, the state of Resident Evil media where that scene is an upside. Well, I think that was everything I was looking to say, so thanks for following me down this RE cinematic rabbit hole. I'm not going to say something ridiculous like, let's hope for better content in the future, because we all know that's not going to happen, but well, now that I think about it, there's no real upsides here, is there? Well, thanks for watching anyways, and oh, for the small portion of you that stuck around this far, make sure to stay tuned. There's some good stuff coming, perhaps of the 4D variety? Okay, Rufus says I have to go now. Alright guys, I'm out. I'll catch you all next time right here on the Resident Evil Retrospective. Yo people, thanks for spending just a bit of your busy day with me. I hope you guys are enjoying these movie and show reviews lately, because I'm having a lot of fun making them. Speaking of which, if you have yet to see my other RE media related content, I'll have it all linked here on screen, and when you're finished watching every single episode of those videos second by second, maybe think about swinging over to my Patreon. Thanks to the generous support of some absolutely incredible people, I'm able to bring all this, well, let's be generous and say mediocre content out to all of you, so if you're lucky enough to be in a position to help out, I'd more than appreciate it. Well, that's all for now, friends and potential enemies. I'll see you all again next time, so until then, peace out.